Hi, thank you so much for joining me today on In Vibrant Company.
Thanks for having
Um,
me.
I would just love to begin with a bit of your story. Where were you born and raised? All right,
Yeah, start. You
we
go ahead.
can't stop laughing because we're friends, but
I
okay.
know. Go ahead.
Where were you born and raised?
First of all, thanks for having me. I'm so excited to be here. It's such an honor to be interviewed by you, obviously. I was born in, I was going to say Lagos, Nigeria. I was not born in Lagos, Nigeria. I wish. I was born in New York, and I like to say I was raised in Lagos, Nigeria. And what I
Like,
mean
what
by that,
ages? When did you move back to Nigeria?
oh my gosh, that's what I'm saying. I lived in New York until I was 3. And this
Mm.
is my mom kind of telling me this story. For some reason, I have a really fuzzy memory of like anything before like 12.
Hmm.
Um, and then my parents moved to California for a couple of years, see around the age of 7 or 8, because I remember going to school there for a couple of years. Because my dad got a job. Technically, my dad is the first generation. Just being here in the U.S., he actually went to school here in the U.S. for college, and just like every other Nigerian, ended up kind of moving back through work. But his job actually moved him from here to Nigeria, which is what started our journey back in Nigeria.
Same for
Um, what's that?
same for me.
Yeah, and then my
Born
mom,
in the U.S. until 6, moved back for my dad's job. How
that's
funny.
funny. Yeah.
Yeah.
So then my mom decided Nigeria is cool and all that, but then I have 2 kids. My brother and I are just 10 years apart. So my brother was still out here. My mom was like, listen, my mom's like, okay, we need to come back. I need to stay with him. So they started moving me back and forth a little bit. So I was in Nigeria for quite a couple of years and then went back. I was actually in London for a stint for a year. My mom was not a fan, so we left very quickly. And then went back to went back to the US and then actually went back to Nigeria, which to me was kind of more my formative years for high school. So I was 12 and went to high school in Nigeria for a couple of years. But in between that, I always went back and forth to like America. But I would say raised in Nigeria, raised in Lagos, and raised in Nigeria because my mom was surrounded herself with just that community. So even when I was in the US, I felt very much like I was in Lagos.
Yeah.
When I had holidays here, I was back in Nigeria. When I had holidays in Nigeria, I was back here. So a lot of that back and forth.
How did
Um,
it, like, do you
what
remember how it
is so
felt?
funny. Yeah.
Do you
Go
remember how
ahead.
it felt moving back and forth a lot? Did you find it disruptive or like difficult to make friends?
You know what? It's interesting looking back. I actually really loved it because I felt like
Mm.
I didn't stay long enough to just get into just this. You know how when you're younger, people can be like catty and it's like, you're not cool enough, you're not fun enough. I was always kind of cool and fun because once I was here for a while, go to the US and it's like, oh my gosh, so what you do in Nigeria? And it's like, oh, here's what I did and all of that. And then go back from the US to Nigeria. It's like, oh my goodness, you're so fun. Tell us what the latest is here. What kind of pants are we wearing? Are we wearing bell bottoms this year?
Yeah.
Like, what's going on? So it was always kind of nice and fresh. And this is what I mean by credit my mom a lot in terms of like my mom was always the constant, the dads, as you know, were always sort of working all of that. But my
Mhm.
mom was very big on I still had my friends I kept in touch with, right? I still had a community around me, so lots of family friends. I sort of did similar things. Holidays, we did holidays together with certain groups. So I think that kind of kept things
Yeah. I've
quite.
seen you post on social media some of these like really good friends of yours that are Nigerian, and I'm wondering, is
Yes.
it from school or is it from family friends?
It's from family friends. I actually have a really good friend of mine who I would say I grew up with, but it's funny because I met him when I was 7, and we were the only two. And ironically, he was born here and he was in the US and I think moved back when he was around that age, 7 or 8. But like he moved back, like his family moved back, and now, they're doing amazing things in Nigeria. But I went back and forth. But at 7 and 8, I met him. We were the only two quote unquote Americans, and we just kind of stayed close. But then high school, we went to different high schools, did different things, and then reconnected actually after college with me now going back and forth more often to Nigeria myself. But it was almost like we didn't miss a beat, right? Of course, we
Yeah.
kept in touch on Facebook, all of that. But now I'm like really good friends with his wife. And then
That's
I
awesome.
got to kind of relate to certain things because I went to high school there a little bit, just a little bit of that. So I have a lot of those stories where it's like they're family friends, or I met them at school briefly,
Yeah.
but we just kept
Where
in
did you
touch.
do high school in the end? Here or there?
Both, yeah. So I
Oh,
did high
wow.
school in Nigeria, yeah. Then I came out here. I mean, true. The thing about high school in Nigeria is you do it earlier on. So like you graduate as early as like 15 or whatever, and then you come out here and then you can do like 2 or 3 more years. So, but it was amazing because when I came out here and say what you can about like being in Africa and schools out there, yes, it was a private school, so there's that too. But a lot of those schools are advanced. So when I came here, I mean, I was a star student just
Same.
because a lot of those things I knew already. So when it was time to go to college, those AP classes were, it was just a breeze. I mean,
You know,
not
it's
and
so funny. Like, considering we're friends, we never really talked about this before, but
yeah,
it's so interesting because I came back to the U.S. at 15, and same thing. I found high school like really easy.
so easy.
It was a good school. You
Yeah.
know, it was just so because like just little things like you couldn't use a calculator in Nigeria, and I was doing like
Yes.
advanced math. And
Yes.
here you had a graphing calculator. I was doing all. I was like, what? This is great. You know,
I know.
open book tests. What?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
And like,
So
and then
then,
Nigeria was so competitive too in those schools. I mean,
mhm, mhm.
these were private schools and really well regarded, and a lot of those students were going to college internationally or things like that. And
Which one did you go to?
a day city college, which now is probably I have no idea what it's like. But back then, I mean, it was ridiculous. We had yeah, I'm gonna say this, but just kind of give some perspective. But there were folks that were flying their kids. It was a boarding school, and so it's like first year school, whatever, and you're not allowed to have what we call provisions, which is pretty much food and all that. Bring in phones. I mean, cell phones were not really a thing. Now I'm really aging myself. We're not really a thing back then, but some folks did. But folks will fly into school, like drop their kids off in helicopters, like
Oh
at
my
school.
god.
They had to ban it. They had to ban it at some point because it got too ridiculous. But that's the kind of school that I was in. But what I also loved about that school is, I mean, 80% of it was maybe Nigerians, but there were international students, folks from Switzerland, right? And
Oh,
of course, London was more common and America was common, but like folks from all over that, maybe they had it tied into Nigeria or maybe, there's some expats and things like that. But it was just such a good, well-rounded school. Very much
interesting.
an international school in Nigeria. Yeah.
Okay, very different from me then.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
and then where did you go to? I went to Federal, but where did you go to college?
I went to Cornell. So that was the
In-
thing. When I then got here, did school, all of that, my grades were amazing. My being Nigerian parents, as you know, it's very much like you have to go to the best, whatever the best schools. And of course, Ivies were very much a thing. So I only applied to the Ivy League schools, not all of them, but I picked a handful. I knew I was going to school for engineering. That was also very much another Nigerian thing. It's like, if you're not an
Doctor,
engineer or a doctor
engineer,
or a lawyer,
accountant.
those three things, which for some reason I almost wish they added entrepreneur. It's like to be a fourth, just because Nigerians are so like they're
Yeah.
visionary, so smart, all of that. I think we could do, and a lot of people are doing amazing things, which is why I said that. But anyway, those three things. I knew I was very much going to be an engineer. I applied to schools that were local to me in California, so the Bay Area, which is where it's so funny. I was going to say where I'm from, where I grew up. I told you it's like up both. And but then I also wanted to be really far away from home because I just wanted to experience what that was like.
Yeah.
So I applied to Cornell, MIT, all the works, got into the schools, but Cornell was the only school that gave me a full ride, at least right off the gate.
Yeah.
So it was very much an easy choice. Yeah, and this is a silly fun fact. For some reason, I thought Cornell was really close to New York City. That was another reason why I picked it.
What surprise you were in for?
I got there. This is such a legally blonde moment. Because I got there, I unpacked myself, all that, and I went to they had like an admissions, I guess a registration office that, like when you're checked in and all that. And I was like, hey, how do I get a cab to New York City? And it was very much, I'm not kidding. They were
That's
like,
amazing.
it's this
Only
girl.
16-hour drive? Like,
7 hours. Yeah. And they
yeah.
were like, New York City is not good. It's a good 7 hours. Like, check your Google Maps, which at that time, I mean,
Can I
whatever.
tell you, like, everything you're saying makes so much sense because when you grow up sometimes like outside of America, you hear these things and you just kind of make up things. I remember
Yeah.
when I was younger, I thought that, St. John's University,
Mhm.
like in my head, I wanted to go there. Why? Because at the time they had like a cool basketball school, and I
Yep.
thought it was near New York City. Like it's in
There
New
you
York,
go.
but it's not in like
That's
I made up these like, or I
all
really
these
wanted to go to
things.
Boston University. Never visited, never been to Boston. I just liked the catalog.
I
Like
mean, I know. Well,
I
I
got
think you also just think like with Ivies, right? Because So you have all the locations, like Harvard is in Massachusetts. It's like Cornell is in New York. And I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, this
You're
is,
like,
it's closer than California would be to New York City, right? But not like it's in Ithaca, which is so far away. But of course, like everyone knows that now, and it's very much, very much a thing. But back then, I felt like you didn't really hear a lot about like Cornell, where it was located, and I didn't know anyone that was there. The
yeah.
Fulbright sold me. They were the number 3 school at that time for engineering, computer and electrical engineering. So
Wow.
for me, it was a no-brainer.
So you
Yeah,
studied computer and electrical
I
engineering. Were you like the
studied.
only girl in like all your classes, or?
I was the only girl. No,
Yeah.
I was the only Black female, of course. I was one of like 3 girls in my graduating class, which
Were
was
the other girls American or?
no. Actually, one was American and one was Indian, and then myself. And I
Right.
was super close to the Indian girl who's doing amazing things right now in India.
That's
Yeah.
awesome. I like that you're still in touch. And like what was that experience like studying like STEM at that
Yep.
time, where that
Yeah.
big focus of women in STEM was a thing?
I
You know,
have to tell you, the women in STEM and all that, and I'm so glad we're having more of the discussion around that, just because there's very few of us. But at that time, I don't think I really
noticed.
appreciated or like understood. I mean, I noticed it, but to be honest, this is
It
so
never like made you, because they've said sometimes that women sometimes have less confidence when you remind them that they're the only woman in a class. Like it didn't stop you. Like
no, and this is what I was gonna say. I'm so used to being the only, which is it's crazy to say that, but like I didn't think anything of it. It's like,
well,
oh, one of 3. Well, I have these 2 other ladies that I could be best friends with. And to me, it was just kind of part of life to like work with some of these men. So I'll tell you how I got into engineering. I knew I had a thing for computers and just engineering and all that, just technology in general, because I had a brother who loved video games. And I mean, we're talking about this era too, where like computers and internet was like starting to sort of become a thing too. My brother was really into video games. He was super smart with like computers and all. They had a best friend who was also really into computer science and coding and all that. But I would play video games with my brother. And then when my brother was like off to college and doing all that, I would play the games. And sometimes they don't work. Remember, we take them out and we blow them and all that. There were times where it's like the electrical wires were not, like something
wow.
would burn in them, or like, yeah, like, and I
And you
would
take
take
them
them
apart?
apart and try to figure it out. Yeah.
Wow.
So it was just very intriguing for me. I think it was maybe a survival thing. It was like, well, this is the only game I have and I want to play. And my dad wasn't really into TV and cable and all that. So, but he would let me play video games. So it's like putting together, trying to make it work. Your brother's not here. No one is going to help you figure it out. And I just would put it together, and I thought it was just something fun and
Yeah.
interesting, different. Yeah. And I
Yeah.
got into it. So when I got into school, like just going to Cornell, it was very much like I just get to learn more of just bigger
What I
things.
love. Yeah.
Yeah. Of what I love.
I love that. I was having a conversation in my DMs the other day with another woman who is actually very interesting in New York. And, she was talking about being in a room recently and being the only brown person there. And she was like, it kind of gave her more attention because you're
Yes.
different. People want to know you and they come talk to you and they're curious. And so
I
sometimes I know it can be a negative, but sometimes, I did a post recently about advantages.
yeah.
You stand out.
I can't believe you said that, because the one thing I love is attention, and I get a lot of it. No, attention in a good way, right? You could have
Right,
bad.
but
To me, attention is attention.
people are dying for attention, spending
Yes,
millions of dollars for attention. And if we,
yes.
I don't know,
Well,
like,
I would tell you. I mean, you know me. I always love a good dressed up moment, right? And that started from very much an earlier age. And imagine going to Cornell and going to engineering. I mean, a lot of these folks wearing hoodies and all that. And I think I just never really got into hoodies and things like that, but there's something nice about wearing a really nice cardigan and a sweater, and wearing, your skirt and pants, and,
yes,
back then even Uggs were a thing, whatever it is, but like showing up just, and when
yeah,
I would walk into the room, you definitely knew I was in the room. And that
yeah,
has helped me even until today. I
yeah,
love walking into the room and people noticing that I'm walking into that room. And so that has helped me with, even when I go on stage and I present, I'm like, I want you to know that I'm here. And it has added this confidence, like just,
yes,
I want to be seen. I want to be heard. Like, I want
yes,
people to know that I'm there. So
yes,
even at Cornell, we were doing engineering projects and all this. And, at the end of it, even with the thesis and everything else, you have to present what you've done. And they'll always put us in groups. I worked with some of the smartest people, I have to tell you, like in the world. I mean, these schools, they're not just allowing anybody in, of course, just academically, like really brilliant minds. But a lot of these folks are engineers, very much in their shell. They just want to code. I mean, you literally see them doing this, right? And just stay up late night, which that was also another interesting thing. It's like staying up late night coding. I didn't love all that, but at the same time, it was also just a bonding moment for everybody. By the way, cut long story short, we'll have these projects, but then there's always the whole like, who's going to present? Like, I don't want to present. And I'm always like, I want to present. I want to do it. I want to sell this. And this kind of dovetails itself into how I go into my career. But it's like, I want to present this to folks
Yeah.
so they have an idea of like what we did, why it's important,
Yeah.
why they should pretty much buy into it.
Mhm.
Right. Because it's all about like being on a project. And
You,
that's
you
always,
made such an amazing point about,
yeah.
when you think that the playing field is even, everybody has one thing that they're great at or that they bring to the table that other people don't. And I just did a post on this, like, find your advantage. So you
Yes.
were in a school with other brilliant science people and engineers, and everyone's great. But your thing was that you didn't mind presenting, you're personable, you didn't
Yes.
mind commanding attention, which a lot of
Yes.
engineers, to your point, don't like. And everyone has to find their thing to
You
like
have
give
to
you an
find
edge.
your thing. Yeah.
Such a
And
good lesson.
that's one thing I kind of stumbled upon this, but again, it was just maybe sheer luck, but it was also just me tapping into what I was, because I'm like, I'm good. I know I'm good at something, so it's gonna work for me. And it's exactly that. It's like I'm not gonna compete with those folks who are like super smart and they want to code until midnight every day. Like I don't go to bed. But at the same time, I knew I was just as smart as they were. Maybe I didn't love doing that, but the part that I really loved that they weren't necessarily good at or enjoyed, I just would just harness that. So it's
Absolutely.
like presenting that, and
That's great.
I learned earlier on that that's selling. Like
Yeah.
everyone's selling something.
Yeah.
Everyone's
And
offering something.
life is sales. Like no matter what you
It's
do, you got to know how to sell. But we'll get there. So you studied engineering and computer science, double major.
yes, double major. Actually, I was kind of crazy. Double major. I finished it in 3 years, and then decided I had to do an engineering MBA. Which
Immediately.
what's that?
Like
Immediately.
immediately.
So that's the thing. So I applied for a scholarship. And it was called the Lester Knight Scholarship. They only awarded like just a handful of folks, per year. I applied for that scholarship. I got it. And it's the scholarship is for folks who are in engineering but have a business flair to them, which I'm like, oh, this is me. This is perfect. So I was lucky enough to get that, and so I rolled right into doing like an engineering MBA after that. So I finished my undergrad in 3 years and just tacked it upon, right behind it and did that.
And that was another 2 years.
That was actually it was a year. It took me a
Oh,
year doing that. Yeah. So it was a year. So I finished it in 4 years. I don't know why I was in such a hurry to like
I
finish
know.
college. Again, this is
It's like, why was I rushing? I should have had fun. Yeah.
yes. I wish I would have had fun. When I think of like just talking to my younger self, it's like, Beth, time is an experience. Just enjoy it, enjoy the journey, and just go through it. Like that
Yeah.
would be the thing. But I rushed through it. After that, it's funny, even in my final year, my parents, and maybe you relate to this, they never wanted me to work like while at school. It's like you have to focus. This is all you've got. Like we would give you everything you need, all the resources, money, whatever. But we need you focused. But I had this idea of working in the career center. But it was one of those like work for 2 hours as a receptionist, but it was my way of seeing every job and every
Oh,
company
brilliant.
so I could understand what the different roles are. Because to be honest, when you're going through college, yeah, you want to be a doctor, you want to be whatever, but you don't really know just the other jobs that come through. And
100%.
during my time, it was so big on like investment banking and consulting and all that. And it's like, what does that really entail? How much are they
Mhm.
really paying? Can this sustain me forever? And so for me, I learned very quickly to say, insert yourself in those rooms. So I did that. So I saw the jobs coming in, and I got approached by a technology company to join. This was after I got, the my engineering master's or MBA. And then I decided to join. And the catch there, I decided to join that company. And the catch there was they say you get to travel the world and get to solve problems.
This was for full, like after college or internship?
After college. The internships were, I shouldn't say they're easy, but like they're easy. Like people will come in and say, hey, everyone will pitch you on. I did a couple of investment banking ones working in their technology group. So I worked for Morgan Stanley, worked for JP Morgan, and worked for UBS for my summer internships. And those were fun. That was actually my first foray into New York City. And I remember thinking, oh my gosh, this is like such a magical place. It was just so much fun. Um, but every time I got my check for my internship, I spent every dollar by the time I got home, like literally the same day. And I remember thinking, this is so great. But it was such a fantastic time. But anyway, yeah. I then after college, I got into technology. I
But
worked.
why didn't you like stay in banking? Did you not like it?
I did not love it, and this is why it's really important to kind of like have different experiences and know what these folks have to offer. I thought the pay was fantastic. I thought it was. I didn't find it interesting enough, and a lot of what I did, I felt like was more back office because I
Mhm.
was part of the technology group. I was not, again, talking about
Uh,
attention and being the front of things. Like
you weren't customer facing.
I wasn't customer facing. I was always supplying the technology or tools and all of that for the
Gotcha.
investment bankers, for the most part. And I just didn't really enjoy that. It wasn't my thing. It wasn't my strongest suit. I was good at it, but it wasn't. And I remember my leader, my manager loved me. Like, it's just like, oh, you need to really get into that. I'm like, yeah, it's great. But I didn't see it as a career. It wasn't anything that got me excited.
You need to be customer facing.
Yeah, I know. Love it. I know.
I remember interviewing for a JP Morgan back office role in Delaware. And
Okay.
the whole time I was there, I was like, no,
No,
I'm not
not
back
for me.
office.
Yeah.
Nothing wrong with it. You just know yourself.
You just know yourself. But
Yeah.
and maybe this is just with being younger too. I knew myself, but I was still like, oh, I'll do it. I wasn't like, no, I'm not taking it. I was like, I'll do it.
Yeah.
I'll do it. But I would just always hope, and hope is not a strategy. I tell my folks all the time. But like, it's like maybe this will lend itself into something else. But I just did not have the patience to just sit there and say, okay, I will find my way into something customer facing within that role. And speaking of the only, I mean, that was like all men in suits, showing up, all of that. And it was a different ball game. And I just wasn't really ready to play that game.
So then after college, you went to, can you say the company?
Yes, I can. I went to Cisco Systems and I actually started as a sales engineer. That was the first time I was like, what is a sales engineer? Like, what does that
Yeah.
even mean? But this
Yeah.
is why it's so important to understand all the different roles. But because they had engineering in it, I figured my parents were fine. So I passed that check. And what I found intriguing about it is they said you get to solve problems. You help companies solve business problems, and you get to travel all over the world. And I'm like, oh, I solve problems. The whole point about computers and engineering and all the electric and computer engineering, it's all about solving problems, right? So I love that. And traveling the world, it's something that I've always loved. My mom, very earlier on, I didn't say this when we're talking about just growing up. I always traveled every summer with my mom. And like I was just like her handbag. So if she's visiting friends, I was with her. Well, oh my goodness, I remember spending the summer in Paris. That was so fun. Summer in London, like just going to different places. So it was very much a way to just continue doing that, which I enjoyed. And it's like, it's not my dime. It's even better, right? And I got into that. But what I loved was they were like, you're smart enough. We know everything you've done. We're going to put you through a 12-month, pretty much like another college, like program to learn everything you need to learn for you to be ready. And it was like going through another year of college. So I showed up and I think it was like maybe 40 other people. Half were sales engineers, half were sales. They called them sales account executives. Half of
Mhm.
them were account executives. And we just went through this program. And it was like they taught us everything about Cisco, what a switch is, and how you plug it in. And here's how you help a customer solve a problem. They're trying to get on the end, trying to create a web browser and yada, yada, yada. This is how Cisco creates data centers and all of that. And it was just so,
Wow.
well, yeah, we had certifications every like 2-3 months. They were testing us on Cisco certifications. So by the time I was done with that, I had all my certifications all the way.
And these are certifications that you can use like in the industry. It doesn't have to be
In the
system.
industry, no, it's like
Right.
CCNA, CCNP. They're just like networking
That's amazing.
certifications that you could use just in IT. Um, and so I did that, and then they place you in different places.
And where is this now? You're in California now?
No, this was North Carolina. They to sent a first time. Also, I was like, I have no idea. I did not make the mistake. That was close to New York City. Don't worry.
Did you like it?
What's that?
Did you like it?
We were in a bubble. Like they got housing for all of us, all like in a complex, I guess you could say. There's like
You guys all young, like same
we were
age.
all young. It was seriously like senior year of college all over again. It felt
Yeah.
very much like another MBA.
Mhm.
So I don't know that we really got to experience town. I mean, we went out, I guess, on weekends, but it was one of those like we're going to this one bar, but it was like all of us at the bar, and so it's. I'm trying to remember. The one was called like Top of the Hill or something like that, and it
Do you
was
think that companies still do things like this? Because when I graduated college and I went into buying,
yeah,
we had a training program. We're all out of college at the same time. So you had this cohort and we
yep,
all hung out and
yes,
dated.
yes,
It was a beautiful way to start working. And I
yes.
feel like because this was in a department store world and that has reduced so much, like I don't even know if those things exist anymore.
I think they still do like the really big companies, but as you know, it's such an interesting time now. Like I call like the COVID backlash, like whiplash, where it's like say customers, geez,
Costs.
companies are now like looking to cut cost and having
Yeah.
people come back and do things virtual. So it's not the same experience. I think it was such a unique time. We're very lucky.
People are very
But I think they do it in pockets, but not as big and not as
yeah.
like this is how. And to be honest, I think folks are also looking for different, like college kids are looking for different things. They also, everyone wants to TikTok or, so I think they're looking for different things from their jobs. And not necessarily like, oh, 12 months in this. I think they have very much an entrepreneurial spirit or they don't want to show up for a long period of time.
4 year of one training.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I
Uh,
think too.
so then after that, so how long were you with Cisco?
So I was at Cisco for a decade, which every time I think about it, I'm like, that was too long. No, but it's totally fine. So that was during the dot-com, was it a dot-com bubble? It was like 2008, I believe. Is that what it
No,
was?
after.
No, what? Yeah, that was after, no, not dot-com bubble. Something happened in 2008. What was it?
Yeah, the financial markets crashed.
Financial, right, that's what it was. I was like, wait, it's not the dot-com
Like,
bubble.
what happened?
That's 2000. But yeah, it was such a crazy time. Cisco very quickly had to pivot. Like I was supposed to go to San Diego. Folks were supposed to go everywhere. They were like, no, we need to place you in places that we know are somewhat stable. So they sent me to Washington, D.C. and I covered the three-letter agencies. That was an interesting time where I got to experience another city.
What does 3 letter agencies mean? FBI?
CANGA, yeah, NRO, like a lot of the top secret ones.
I don't even know what NRO means.
You should Google it. You should Google it.
Okay.
It's just a lot of like, I would do the three-letter agencies just because it's like top secret. And once you say that, people are like, oh yeah. But it was an interesting time where
Writing that down.
the world, you're funny, the world was sort of going through, like America was just, it was a crazy time where it was like, we're going to war. There's a lot of that. So they're pumping a lot of money into making sure we're ready into the government. So for me, it was the first time where I was like, wow, what I'm doing is really impacting. Like, it's not just like, yeah, it's
Yeah.
tinkering around and this company gets to whatever. It's like, no, this is really some important stuff. I remember like actually turning on the news and watching the news and I'm like, oh no, this is a lot more serious than, and that was a mind trip to be honest for a while. But that aside, it was an interesting time. It was fun. I learned a lot. I got to work with folks who were just older, like just, you know what I mean? Like they've been in the government forever. So that was also another moment for me where, just walking in is like, oh, I'm just this tiny little cute girl. I definitely got the attention, but I didn't want the attention. I was like, oh, I'm just the little girl that's like, and it's funny because my account executive was also a female and she was blonde. And here I was, and both of us will walk in. I mean, talk about attention. It was like, whoa. And it's
Yeah.
like, to help you with solve whatever problems you're trying to get or whatever new technology you're trying to get into, new technology solutions. And this is what we can bring to the table. So we definitely got our fair share of attention. But I'm telling the story because it's an interesting one. So she left the company for another opportunity. And very quickly, I saw the need to sort of pivot into her role. Right, I was doing both for a while, but like I found her role really interesting because she was going into finding out like these are the main people you talk to. This is what they're trying to do. Like it was the first step.
Let me back up for like the
Yeah.
listener myself. So you were the sales engineer. So you were meeting with clients with her to understand what they needed so you can like work on the tech. But
Yes.
she was the relationship person.
Boom, exactly. She was the
Exactly.
relationship person. She's the one that would bring me and say, hey, you need to come with me. I've had an initial conversation with this person. We need to map out what this looks like for them. Like,
Yeah.
we identify the problem, we've qualified that's an opportunity. Now I need you to kind of do more of the technical validation of the whole thing.
Okay. And
Right.
then you were thinking, oh, I want to do more of that.
I want to do more of that. Like, and I have to say, I give her a lot of credit because sometimes I felt like she brought me on earlier on. Chances are she was just like, I know you would get it. I know it's not just the geeking out piece. You can do that, but like coming earlier on and let's see, what we can kind of bring together fairly quickly, right, to move the deal along. And very quickly, I was like, this is fun. That's what I want to do. I want to build a relationship. I want to know about things even before they happen, right?
Mm.
So when she left, she was actually the one that's like, hey, you can step into my role like anytime. But what people don't tell you, and you probably know this, being, the buyer and customer facing, is like a lot of folks in that role don't really want to tell you like what it entails because they all want the jobs for themselves, whether we like it or not.
True.
Um, and so they wanted to keep me as a sales engineer. Also, it's not every day you find someone sales engineer who can kind of do both. So it was very much
Right.
a value add. But they couldn't find anyone for her role for a while. And so I just had the courage to just go up to the leader and said, look, I actually want to do this role. And the customer advocated for me and said, you guys should just pay her for both, which of course they don't want to do. But I was like, fine, if you're not going to do that, I want this role. You could probably backfill me, engineers, you find a dime a dozen, you can backfill me very quickly. Or I'm working with other engineers too. I'm sure they can kind of help, and that can be open for a lot longer. And their first response was, "Oh, you sure you really want to do it? The quotas are crazy. Like, you probably won't make your number. It sounds good, but it's not what you think." Cut the long story short, they were like, "You need to start from the bottom." I was like, "Sure." So I started as an AM1, which, by the way, at this point, I was from sales engineering step for SC. I was like an SE3, so I went back, started as an AM1.
Good for you.
Yeah, and it was I just knew that I was not going to be in that forever. Also, what they don't tell you is while you might start as an AM1, there is a huge compensation piece to it based on, what you're selling to the customer and all that.
Okay. So
So
it's
I'm like,
still worth it to go
yeah.
back.
So I'm like, I could do it. I remember it's so funny. I was just laying in bed and was having a conversation with Eric. Like, do you think I should do it, Eric? Because like the way you're talking about it, the way you've been thinking about it so much, like, yourself, like push and believe in yourself and like go for it. And he's just like, what's the fallback? And this is what I always love with Eric is like, what's the worst that can happen? You just go back to doing that job. Well, you're going to do that anyway. So I just did that and I never looked back. I was in at Cisco for another year. Eric decided he wanted to go into law, and this is being Nigerian. I was like, if you get into it, I was actually very lenient. If you get into a top 10 law school, I'll move anywhere. And he got into Berkeley, and it was also very much a way to go back home for me. So he got into Berkeley. I moved with Cisco to the Bay Area, and I did that for a year. And very quickly, my customer that I had there was like, hey, I have this other company. Cisco is great. I love the relationship with building all the stuff. But I have another company that, have you heard of Amazon? I'm like, of course, duh. But Amazon Web Services, they're going into the cloud computing, which is pretty much just IT in the cloud. So they get to house everything for you and you just pay like electricity, you just pay like a utility. And he was like, they have my credit card. We're moving there. We want you to move with us. And I was like, oh, that's so cute. Funny. And 2 days later, a recruiter reached out to me, and that was sort of my foray into the journey of going into AWS.
I have goosebumps.
Yeah.
Because so much of life is, because a lot of talking about this generation again, I feel this is part of why I do this. Like, this younger generation gets such bad advice. Like, don't tell anyone your goals or your dreams.
Yeah.
Don't become friends with your clients or your coworkers. But look at you. Your former coworker put you onto her job, and your client was like, let's go.
Yeah.
And that's how same for me. I was always in the buying end, and we work twice as hard and make half what the salespeople make. And my coach, salesperson, I was buying designer shoes, was like, actually a young Black woman living in New York, and she was like, "Oh, come to this side. Like,
Yeah.
it's so not hard." And then another one of my vendors, we called them, was like, "Oh yeah, come," and introduced me to like Jones Group. Like, this was a big
I love
conglomerate
that.
back. And that's how I moved to New York and got a job. Like,
I love
my
that.
client. So
Wow.
this is such an important message.
Where were you before as a buyer?
We were buying. I was an associate buyer. I didn't make it that far because I was so young. in Virginia. So similar to what you were saying,
Wow.
like college training program for it. Do you remember Hex? Did you know Hex?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, it was
Mhm.
like Macy's. Like
Wow. Yeah,
their
yeah,
was in Virginia, and we were in the buying program, and yeah, and that's how
yeah.
I moved
I
to New
love
York.
that. Isn't that
Isn't that
funny?
crazy?
Such similar stories, but like mine is like technology and yours is retail. It's just I love that. Yeah,
Right.
it's everywhere.
And exactly what you said earlier about people don't know the jobs that exist.
Yeah, now
If you want to work in fashion, people say, are you a designer? Are you a model? But there's like sales.
so much
So
behind it.
lucrative, guys. Like,
So look,
yeah,
that's the thing. Like, if anything, if anyone's should take anything from what we're talking about, it's the fact that like look into sales. Sales is very lucrative and it's such a great career. And it's you could find a lot of fun in sort of the back end of what you're doing. So like I love technology. I'm in technology, I love it. You're in retail, you love retail. Like you get to enjoy that, but you are making money while doing that. You're
yeah,
also solving problems and you're building
yeah.
relationships. Like
And
these are
building
things that
businesses.
outlast the job.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
agree. I
Yeah.
so agree. So that's how you got to Amazon. What year are we talking now?
Oh my gosh. When I got married to 2015. October. 2 days from now is my 9th year anniversary at AWS. Isn't that crazy?
That's amazing.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I love that you've been with two companies your whole career.
It's to be
It's
honest
worked
with
out
you.
for you.
Well, and this is actually good. Let's talk about like my journey at Amazon Web Services because I think that would help you understand sort of like the whole like, oh my gosh, you've been here for a long time. When I was at Cisco, I personally thought I'd been at Cisco for too long because when I left and then I went to Amazon, I'm like, oh my gosh, this cloud thing has been happening for a while. Why didn't there are just so many other different roles and in technology things are changing and evolving. I mean, we're talking about generative AI now. Like that's and obviously Amazon Web Services is part of that, but that's also like another evolution. So can you imagine if you're selling, and I hate to say this because people are in these jobs, but selling switches and routers at Cisco, like people are doing generative AI. Like you don't want to be left behind, especially in technology. So you want to keep evolving and making sure your skills do match that, right? And you're the cutting edge, right? So you're not behind. But anyway, I felt like I was at Cisco for so long. I remember getting the offer from AWS, negotiating and getting through that, and thinking, I'm not going to do this for more than 2 years, just because like I can market myself, I can keep going at Cisco, if you remember, like what I said, I started as an engineer and then I moved into sales. So, like I was an engineer for like 3 years, yeah, and then went into sales for like what another 3 years, and then the last two like moved, like cross country pretty much. So if you think about it, those are already like different roles. Like I could have done that at different companies. So
Mm.
there's already that too. Granted,
Yeah.
if it's a different company, who knows what the pay would be or the different structure or the
Yeah.
environment you be in, but whatever.
Yeah.
But when I joined AWS, right, I was actually covering startups in the Bay Area, and that was fun doing all that. But when I joined, it was so flat. AWS was flat because it was still somewhat new, just cloud.
Was
Um,
anybody else doing cloud at the time? Like
oh my
competitors?
gosh, that's a good question. Not really.
Like
No,
yeah.
no. AWS was one of the actually a lot of people were doing private clouds. So
Mm.
think of like Cisco working with like a partner, and that partner kind of has their own. Cisco sells them all the switches, all the stuff that needs to build their data center, and then they provide that to clients. Well, they're doing it in their own private data center, private cloud, right, for customers. But not this, where it's like, hey, this is public. Anyone can sign up, go on, sign up for an account, and you can just start you know, what's the word I'm looking for? Like ramping out whatever services, that you need to build a web browser or, a website or creating, a connect center, a contact center for your environment and so on and so forth. By the way,
Yeah.
um, but where were we with this?
You were
AWS.
saying how your career journey at Amazon, and even though it was 10.
Yes, my career journey in Amazon. So I joined Amazon, so it was very flat. I was covering startups at the time. And then Amazon at the time had what we used to call red states and green states. Pretty much a red state, a state that we didn't really have brick and mortar, so we didn't pay taxes and all that. So we're not really present. So as you can imagine, calling to those customers were hard. I had one of those states, right?
Mm.
I had to build a team around it. And again, going back to sales and relationships and, being, it's like, I would be seeing, I like, hey, this would be good for you. And here's why, and here's the ROI and all that. We just really sold our way into those areas. I mean, it was so, to me, and this is another thing, when you believe in what you're selling and what you're doing, and when I say
Yeah.
selling, it could be anything, it's so easy to be able to explain this is how it's going to help you solve this problem. And so it's very easy for me to see that benefit for that customer once you understand what the customer does and where they're looking to go.
Yeah.
And that
And
was what I did there.
we're startups. So like all the big guys today,
All the big guys
like
today.
startups, like it
Yeah.
was like
Oh yeah, the Snapchat,
Facebook,
Facebook, even Airbnb, like all of those were customers back then.
and they were startups at the time. Like it's so
They were startups
amazing.
at the time. I mean, they were starting to kind of blow up, right? Of course, not really blow up, but like they were somewhat known, but not the way. I mean,
Today, yeah.
not the way they were today. So I got to meet some interesting people. I'll just leave it at that.
I'm sure.
Which was really fun. That's another thing throughout my career and just in general. I love meeting really smart people. I just love learning about people, and oh my goodness, like you want to tap into their brain. You want to understand what makes them tick. You're also learning along the way, like, what made you start Facebook? Things like that. And like, what do you need? And it's like, oh wow. And for me, what's intriguing is that you can see the vision.
Yeah.
When I see things now, I'm like, oh man, like, I can see that. Like I remember that, which is you
Crazy.
can put a price on that. It's just fascinating.
So you're kind of one of the more, you're like one of the most confident people I know. And
Really?
it's not, I think so. I mean, unless
Oh,
yes, you are.
oh,
But I want to be very clear about this because I think there's a lot of fake confidence out there, a lot of bravado. No, it's true. And I've been noticing it a lot. And I think I need to talk about it more. Like, you really, like, I was going to ask you, like, when you met with these people, yes, they weren't who they are today, but they were
yeah.
building big stuff and you were doing big stuff and there was no one holding your hand. You were building
Yeah.
up. Like, where did you get the confidence to just go? Like, or it was always in you and.
I think it's always in me. I think just earlier on, first of all, I remember my mom was always like, you ask too many questions. Like you just always talk too much. And it wasn't like you talk too much, hush, or like you ask too many questions, hush. It was just like, you're always so inquisitive. And I think being inquisitive kind of just allows you to have this aura of confidence about you because you're not going in there trying to pretend that like, I know everything.
Already know. You're like,
Yeah. I'm just really curious. Like, tell me more. But I have to be interested. If I'm not interested, I'm just kind of like, then it makes me feel, to be honest, I'm less confident in those rooms. If I'm like, I'm not interested, I feel weird and odd. Like, what am I doing here? And I think you've seen me in those rooms where sometimes I'm just kind of like, not really. It's funny, it might come off that I'm being a little bit standoffish. I'm just like not confident because I'm not interested in what it is.
Makes sense.
So I just walk in and I'm legit just curious.
Love
Tell
that.
me what you're saying. And also the job allows me to be curious because I'm here to solve your problem. So you have to tell me everything to be able to help you. It's like a doctor. You're going to, I mean, I'm nowhere near what a doctor does. That's
You're
really
a problem solver.
yeah, problem solver. You're going in, hey, here are my symptoms. Here's what's happening. I'm going to ask you questions so I can get to the root cause, right? And figure out how we can help further.
So take us from Beth is in California working with startups to Beth is this big woman she is today and like.
Gosh, isn't it crazy? So that's what I was saying about my journey. And we've been talking for a while, but this is just my life. So I was doing that, covering startups, but I was also covering the red states. But what's really interesting about that piece is the fact that I got to build around that because no one was doing it. It was just like, Beth, here's this stuff that we're trying to sell into. No one's doing it. So I got to create a team around me. It's like, hey.
And were they like, did you have to push for it or they were like, yes, he can give you what you need?
It kind of happened organically where it's like they saw success in the startups and what we were running. I remember I had like a quadrant and I'm like, here are the customers that are really doing really well, but and we have them. Here are the customers that could be doing really well and they're on their way, but we need to give them more attention. Here are the customers that they're not doing so well. There's something going on. We have to sell them a different way. And here are customers that we're not even touching at all. And they have a lot of potential. And that's where the red states were. So it's very much like, okay, there's a lot of potential here. How can we do it? Very quickly, putting a strategy and having a vision around this allowed me to kind of go into those spaces where it's like, okay, we see what you're saying. Let's test it out. And if we don't do anything, it doesn't matter. If we do something, it helps. So like, why not? So very quickly, it was very much like, okay, start that. And then every time we look to hire someone, whatever, I'm like, hey, let's put them here. We already have people covering them in this quadrant. Let's move them to this because we can get more out of it. So very quickly, and when we did that and we saw results.
And how old were you at the time?
Oh my gosh, that was 2015, 2016.
Okay, so like 10 years ago, 9 years ago.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I wasn't
Early
very
30s.
young. It was early though, but then too, like I said, it was so flat. It was like me and when I left, Cisco and I came over to Amazon as what we call an IC, an individual contributor. So it wasn't like I had this layers of management, under me and all this stuff. It was that, but it was very flat where it's like you had the individual contributors and then you had the managers manage like a whole segment because that's just where we were in terms of selling cloud and all that. But very quickly, going to that boss and saying, "Hey, I could do this. I think we can do a lot here." And we were seeing results right away. I mean, in 1 year, I think we doubled the business like overnight. Like grew 100. I remember this number, 123%, which was like insane. I remember thinking, "Oh my gosh, how's this possible?" And then we did it again the next year, and then I'll never forget this. We're in a town hall when we do those, like, oh, let's all get together, let's talk about our numbers. And the big boss at the time was like, hey, we're looking to now expand into other areas. We're looking to expand in New York and blah, blah, blah. And I remember going home when I was down there. And then after the meeting, I just, because everyone's walking out and I was like, hey, that's so good. We had such great numbers this year. And then I said, oh, wow, you're looking to expand to those areas. How exciting. He was like, yeah, from New York, don't you want to go? Like, he just tapped me and said, from New York, don't you want to go to New York? Like, you've done great things here. You could help, you could replicate and do the same thing in New York. And I'm like, oh, I'm not from New York. I went to Cornell. And that's the thing. I'm from the Bay Area. For some reason, I think it might have to do with me just wanting to be the face all the time. Because I think, and I'm not generalizing here, but folks in the Bay Area, because they're so smart, it's very tech heavy. They just want to do their work. They want to, that kind of thing. But I was very much like, here's what we're doing. Here's all of, and here's almost, and I was very much like, hey, we got to get business done. Like, I love that you're tinkering here, but how can we get, get results, all that. So I think everyone just kind of thought, oh, you must be from New York City. I was like, no, I'm actually from the Bay Area. And I kind of chuckled, but I said, but I love New York City. I love New York. I went to Cornell. And he was just like, yeah, if you want to go, I think it's be a great opportunity for you. And I remember I went home and I was kind of chuckling, just like I told the story, telling Eric. And Eric was like, let's do it. Let's go to New York. And I mean,
At this point, is he finished law school?
he was finishing law school. I had a baby that was about to turn 1. And he was finishing law school. And for him, it's like big law. He was like, I'd love to practice big law in New York. This is great. Again, remember, this is his second career. And so he's like, and if we don't do New York City now, this
When
is what we do. We'll never be able to do it.
Yeah.
And I just remember him saying that. And I was like, oh, man, that could be kind of exciting. I mean, we're looking at places to buy in the Bay Area. I'm from the Bay Area. So for me, it was very much like, this is home. And he was like, babe, we can always come back. And then I just like went back and I had a conversation with my boss and I was like, you know what? I'm interested. And at that time, they didn't have anyone like saying, hey, I would go, because when you're comfortable in the Bay, you're comfortable in the Bay. We had the Bay and we had
Nice life.
those were the huge hubs. No one is trying to go to New York City and live in a box and figure all that stuff out. But you were going to say something.
I was going to ask you just to give our listeners some can you hear that?
Yeah, no, I can totally hear you.
Just
Yeah.
to give my son. But anyway, just to give the listeners some perspective, to go to New York now. Now we hear you say you were working with Amazon and with Facebook and all these big tech companies. It sounds like the pinnacle. But moving to New York for you was an even bigger opportunity because it was going to be like financial services, right? Like
I
banks.
have to be honest with you. I actually saw it very much as like you get to do something different. Like it's New York City. It's another
You
big
didn't care
city.
about size and all that. Good for
No,
you.
I wanted to build, and that's another thing. That's the one thing I noticed about myself earlier on. Again, I get put in these places and I think, what works for me. When I did the whole red state thing, I really enjoyed building. I built a team around myself. Then I started moving up, right? I became senior and all this stuff. These folks, I was now mentoring them, reporting into me, all of that. And then I had an opportunity to build. So I'd done this. I was like, oh, it's been successful. This is great. And it's very much like, I started feeling the itch a little bit. I was like, what's next? This is also another thing. Eric and I, for some reason, every 3 years, we're always like, what's next? Where are we going? Which we stopped doing that because now we have a lot more we have to deal with kids and everything else. But it was very much kind of like a what's next moment. I wasn't going to New York just for financial services. And I'll tell you, when AWS, huge, right? Everyone knew AWS at that time. We're still building. In New York, we had the big financial services, like we call them global financial services, so like the Goldmans, JP Morgans, will all be managed. Absolutely. The small, medium-sized businesses, the SMBs, will also be managed because those are easy. Those are the folks that will go in and log into, Amazon and will start, using our EC2 services and our storage and our compute and all that. And we go technical, but either way, like they'll start using that. So we knew those people were logging in and we're able to capture them. So folks were covering them. So we had folks who were covered SMB, folks who were covering the really big ones. The fat middle, which is like the mid market, we did not have. And that was what my boss was covering and looking to expand into and said, hey, do you want to move to New York to build that? So when I moved to New York, it was myself. I was one of the first folks that said, I will do it. And they moved like 2 people from Seattle, and then they started hiring folks in New York. Because at that time, I had been at the company for 3 years or something. Yeah, 3 years or 2.5 years, 3 years at the time. I already knew, like, okay, this is how we do it. This is how we build. Again, I'd done the red state. New York is not a red state. It's a green state. We're in New York City. It was just very, I don't want to say it was easier. It felt easier for me to like build, hire people, tell folks to be on the ground. We have a program called Bar Raiser Program. I really love this about AWS. The way we interview is you have 4 or 5 people you interview with, and there's usually someone in there who's a bar raiser. And the whole idea of a bar raiser is someone who's like a culture keeper, right? And they are the ones that say, hey, based on what I'm hearing here, I think this person's a good fit for us. They make sure that we're calibrating. So it's not like a very objective view, like, oh, this person spent 20 years at Goldman, so like they have to be in financial services. It's like they could do that, but they could be a bad fit. They could not be thinking about the customers. They could just be thinking about their pocketbook, right? So they might not be a good fit for us. We have a very rigorous culture. We have something called leadership principles. I think we'll have 16 of them, or maybe we added 2, where it's like you have to be customer obsessed. You have to have a bias for action. You have to deliver results. You have to earn trust with people. You have to think big, so thinking beyond like what it is. You have to be all right a lot, so have good judgment, high judgment, how you do things. And so we sniff those things out of our interview process. Anyway, I became a bar raiser, which then I became a culture keeper and understanding. Now we had to hire very quickly. I was a bar raiser for over, I mean, we're talking 200 candidates, probably over 200 candidates. We hired over 100 people on the floor in a very short period in that stint of a year just to build out that hub, right? And so I became somewhat of a heartbeat of that hub. Like everyone they hired kind of touched me and all that. At that point, we're still delivering on numbers. So then, of course, the big boss noticed and all that. I got promoted from that, like,
just give me the time for what, and then you got promoted to what?
So I got promoted from being an individual contributor, like a senior individual contributor, actually got like mentor of the year, because that was another thing. It was like I was doing all this stuff. It was crazy. But it was just, I was doing all the things that came naturally to me that I enjoyed, but it was just sort of right place, right time also, right? So I went from being a senior individual contributor to now being a senior leader overnight. I was now in charge of, I think the book of business is probably about 250 million, which at that time was like, oh my gosh, I went from nothing to like that. But then they hired, oh, your video just went up. Oh, then they hired another senior guy who had been in IT for like over 25 years at that point. And this is important to kind of say this because like he was doing that. He was, the senior guy that was helping to shape the segment and all that. And he left like I think a year and a half or something after like kind of very like abruptly. He had like a CRO position at a startup that he took, which was a great opportunity for him. It's actually really sweet. He put me down as a reference for him. So when he was getting that job, they called me to ask about him, which I thought was just like a huge compliment. Like, wow, okay, like she's a good egg that can vouch for me, and she's a senior leader in the in the space that can talk for her. Anyway, back to my other thing. So he left. That job was vacant for a while. Think about someone who had 25, 30 years of experience. His book of business was like 3 times mine. Interim, they were trying to figure out like who was going to cover it. They had it open for so long. They were like, Beth, you're already doing this. You should just go into that job.
They said that?
They said that. And I remember calling my mentor at the time. And I was just like, are you kidding? What are you talking about? And my mentor, this is also interesting. She was a lady who looked just like me. The only other lady that I know that's looked like me. She came into a big role. And I remember sitting down with her. She did a town hall, whatever, and I asked her a question. I said, look, she was part of our solutions architectural groups, like engineering. And I remember asking her a question, and I said, look, I believe the solutions architects are the heartbeat. Like they are the brains behind the operations. We have such lofty numbers we're trying to get clients in. How are we going to keep up with, because at that time, cloud was a thing. We had to get people from other tech companies, and we had to get really smart people to come over. how are we going to keep up with this, and how are we going to incentivize to make sure we're getting the good talents to make sure we can keep this momentum? And I think just based on that, her seeing like people asking her about, like, oh, what are you doing? Blah, blah, blah. When are we going to have the night? But like her seeing that, she was like, I need to spend time with you. So after the meeting, she told me, she's like, I need to spend time with you. And I was like, oh yeah, I have time. Do you have time? Like in future 15 minutes, just talking to people. She's like, yeah, 15 minutes. I'll be at that room. I met up with her and I went to sit down with her and telling her it was a short meeting. It felt like a short meeting. It was probably 30 minutes, but I remember telling her, I was like, and I don't want to mention her name, but like, I remember telling her that if you do this right, this is going to be really big. I think we have massive opportunity here from the way I see our clientele, from the way I see us hiring, where cloud is going, like what the conversations I'm hearing, like this could be really massive for you. Like you could expand. And to me, I've always felt like the engineers being the brains behind the operations. If you have such a good engineering team, you can do anything. And that was sort of my message to her. I don't know, cut my long story short. And it's funny because she'll still tell me that till today. Like, do you remember having that conversation? I was like, I remember. And
And you said that to her?
I said that to her. And she's such a big deal now. Like, she has built such an amazing like organization. I mean, she has.
But it's funny, but she's your mentor.
She's not. That's the funny thing. We can all learn from each other. She became my mentor because I also saw the way she just took things. She was just so sharp and on top of things, and she saw things very much like I'm not just managing. At that time, I think she was managing like maybe 100 engineers. I'm not just managing 100 engineers. She saw like how she could scale into 1,000 engineers and how put them into the different areas and how we could kind of have certifications around it. So anyway, that was the whole thing. I didn't know where I'm going with all this, but either way, I remember calling her and she looked at me. She gave me the same look I gave her, like, dude, you're going to come. She was like, you need to take this as a massive opportunity. And it was the same thing. It's like, if that fails, you just go back to what you were doing before. Like, what does that matter? I took that on. I remember I stayed now managing my peers, which was, again, another humbling experience because you have certain standards and because they're your peers, how some of them work and
Wait, but you had to move into a role where people who were your peers you had to manage. Yeah. How did you do that? Very hard.
It's really hard. And to be honest, I feel like sometimes when I do hard things, and I know people talk about imposter syndrome and all that, when I do hard things, it's almost better when you're naive about it, when you haven't like had too much thought into like, oh my gosh, what am I going to tell this person if they decide they're not? So you just roll it into it. And I knew what made me successful to that point, that I just knew that I had to continue what I was doing, but just on a larger scale. And I tried not to deviate too much from that. But I also used them very much as like my anchors. Like, hey, I need you guys. Like, I know what you can bring to the table, guys and gals, I should say. I know what you can bring to the table. I know how you can help me. We can do this together, or that was sort of my thing, but of course saying it very much in a very humbling way, but also just confidence just around it. Some survived, others didn't, but that's really very quickly kind of figure that out. But yeah, that was crazy, but I think what helped me again was building the relationships with clients. That was the most important thing to me. Like now it's a bigger playing field. The customers are bigger. It's a bigger role. So understanding them, understanding what they wanted. When the customers really feel like you're in it for them, 100%. They don't really care what you look like, where you are, what age, whatever. You're actually showing up even a lot more mature than others, because they're like, wow, she means business about helping us.
So you got promoted recently. Yes. Can you tell us?
Oh my gosh.
I know, you have to talk about it. Tell us your title and like the impact, like what it means to be at this level at such a company.
Yeah, well, it's funny to talk about my journey. It feels like forever. So my title is actually Managing Director for Financial Services for North America, specifically fintech customers. And
you're on the executive committee?
Oh my gosh. I guess you could call it. So like at AWS, we have like officers of the company. Technically at this level, you become an officer of the company. But I was sort of thinking about how to say it, because before I got this promotion, the role that I was in before, I was actually doing something somewhat similar. But, I actually need to say this, because we talk about, not everything has been rosy for me in my career. Like I've taken the opportunities that I've made it into something. But before I got this promotion, I was it felt like I was on La La Land and I was on this fast track. I covered customers that were B2B SaaS customers. And I'd known I created it because when I told you moving to New York, I built the stuff. And these customers were billing. My book of business was over $1 billion. Um, and they moved us into sort of like the enterprise sectors and all that. Well, when they move you and you go through a transformation, you're bound to kind of have a new boss. And the new boss at the time brought another layer sort of in between us because it was something that he didn't know. And this is something I learned really quickly. Again, you learn kind of through your experiences. I learned very quickly that when you're a boss, whatever, and you acquire certain groups or whatever, the easiest thing for you to do instead of you just like moving it directly to what's already working for you and then trying to figure out how to how to fix things, that's a lot harder. It's a lot easier when you move them in, you put someone on top of them so they can help you figure that out while your own bus keeps moving, your train keeps moving, and you're not stopping that. Anyway, cut long story short, they brought a leader to manage us because now we're like a new team that was coming into the organization. And that new leader managed myself and another person. Actually, yeah, managed myself and another person that was also covering similar customers. So I had B2B customers, so the person had B2C. So my manager kind of had all of it. And this is just for the Northeast. The Northeast and the Southeast got combined, so now we really got bigger. Because my business was doing so well. The other business, I mean, there was also COVID. I think they were kind of having a tough time because they're B2C.
Yeah.
B2B was just taking off. We were doing really well. Again, I got to double my team literally overnight. Anyway, there was an opportunity when they combined the Northeast and the Southeast to then have those two businesses stand alone. And they asked my big boss, what he wanted to cover. Of course, he wanted the bigger one, which is what I had that had been thriving. And I'll tell you why I'm telling the story. And I've been covering them for like, at this point, like a good 4 years, right? Since I moved to New
So
York.
just so that, so he had these two businesses under him, and when
Yes.
they became at all one region, they
Yes.
were like, "We don't need the three. We don't need these two, and you on top. So you pick one." Okay.
Yes. You pick one. You pick mine. Now there's an opportunity for me to kind of step out and do something. And so they had me kind of stepped out of that and they gave me the other one that wasn't doing so well. And now I had to manage those folks. Again, I was now moving into a role that I had a peer that I had to manage. That was humbling. During that time, that was after COVID, hiring freeze was a thing. So now I have like half of the team that I had to figure out. Not everyone will be happy with you taking on roles, right? So some folks were like, actually, this is a good time for me to kind of do something. Because there are some that wanted that job. They didn't get it. It's time for me to do something else. So there's that. But once they leave, you can't really backfill because there was a hiring freeze. And I'm saying this story kind of talk about how this promotion kind of came about. So I took that on, hiring freeze. I had this team before. I have never really felt like I was so humbled, but in the best way, where my team that I had before, half of my team wanted to move with me.
Oh.
Yeah. They ended up like this is a hiring freeze, so I couldn't like get, get new head or whatever. But internally you can move, people could move. And that's when I was like, wow, I know I'm doing something right. Like something is happening here. Half of that team moved with me. I could have easily drowned. Like I had half of the team, the business itself wasn't doing so well. Half of my team moved with me. I had in a very short period of time, like 90 days to like turn things around.
Wow.
It was crazy. But because these folks, I mean, we know how we hunt, all of this. We started turning things around. Of course, we didn't get to like over 100% on all of that, but we got close enough where the big bosses at the top really took notice as to what was going on. Where it's like, oh my gosh, she did this here. She's now doing this here. Half of the team just moved with her. And I remember kicking and screaming, talking about disappointment. I didn't know at the time I was kicking and screaming that I didn't want to take on this job. Like, I can't believe it. Like I had been the one building this team. Why wouldn't they tell my boss to like move to that? But you have to think about it. That's your boss. Your boss, if at the end of the day, they're responsible for that business just as much as you are. If they think, if he's managing you and that business is doing well, he's still managing that business. So rightfully so, he took on that role. And I moved on to the other. But I remember thinking, if I get off of that bus or like train, then I'm like, now I'm off of, I'm off of the bus, I'm off the train. I'm not going to really get anywhere. I'm not going to get promoted. And I remember HR calling me and saying, we understand how you're feeling and all this stuff. And I laid everything down. I said, these are all things that I've done, all of these things. But she was like, I get it. I understand, blah, blah, blah. This is where the business is going, all of that. This would be a great opportunity for you. And at the time, I didn't see it. I remember crying out in front of her, but just like I was so distraught. I went home, all of that. It felt like a disappointment. But like I said, I took on that very quickly 3 months into it. My team now started shifting in there with me. I remember I would report my numbers and I was like, well, we're at 70%, but I'm at 50% of my people. So yes, that's why the business are doing so well.
Yeah.
However, this is what we've done with these certain services. Like I would always find the good and just the spin and like, this stuff is doing better. It's not where we need to be, but it's doing better, all of that. Cut the long story short, we started turning around the business, right? And very quickly when the whole, not layoff, but like when the hiring freeze got lifted, also it was like the floodgates. I was able to hire people again, double the team pretty much overnight from the B2C. And then we went through another transformation. Like now, oh, this is another thing. So now I've done all this stuff. It's November. We're humming. I'm sending out like, oh, great job, team. Here's all we've done. We're getting kudos, all of that. And then December rolls around and we go through another transformation.
What?
Exactly. Now they decided we want to go into industries. And this is how the financial services came about. Now, remember I told you, now I was covering this, wasn't doing so well, but the areas that were doing well, I was highlighting those areas. Like I was meeting with all those folks. I had the relationship. 30% of my business were fintech companies. Those fintech companies at that time were thriving. They were trying to do well. The folks that moved from my old team to my new team, I put them in those accounts because when something is doing well, you pump it into it, right, to accelerate that. I put them in those areas. They started doing well. So when we go to the transformation, they're literally, you put people in boxes pretty much. We're like, well, we know what Beth has done. She went from what was really amazing to what wasn't amazing and did really what's amazing. And by the way, now she has fintech accounts that are doing well. We have to have her take over all of fintech, all of financial services. And that's how I got into this role. And then when it was time to get promotions and all of that, they looked at my scope, they looked at my body of work, they looked at what I'd done with the B2B customers. But what was really, really impressive, I think, when we look back, and this is what we always tell people about, like the opportunity, when the opportunity comes knocking, it might feel like a disappointment at the time, but take it and make it something, like leave things better. I would say, when I take on something, I want to leave things better than the way I found it, whatever that means. And I pretty much took the success I had from there, not knowing my team will move with me, which is also a testament to that, but also like replicating what I had before, being successful there. And at AWS, we have this, you do a promote doc, which anyone at AWS would tell you, it's just a grueling process where you have to talk about everything you've accomplished. Blah, blah. Cut long story short, that was the impressive part of that document. The fact that like I took something and I turned it into something that it wasn't, and then the book of business. And that's what pretty much got me to this role, being a managing director. So I could have moved into this role just being a senior sales leader, right?
So in terms of job, is it like you're doing the same job that you've now made much bigger, but you've gotten this bigger title and accolade, or do they change your actual job again?
They changed pretty much I moved up. They like, when I moved into this role, kind of taking it out of the name, because remember, I was just doing the East.
Yes. Now
I was just managing. So I was managing the Northeast with the B2B, and then I moved to managing the East for the B2C. So that was also kind of, and that was another thing. HR was like, it's a promotion. You're going from just the Northeast, now you're managing the whole of the East. But when we went through the transformation, they could have kept me with just managing the East.
Right.
Like FinTech East, right? Because that was also part of the name. But they said, no, we've seen the way she's been able to take this. Anyone that can like figure this out. Like she took this. It was a business that we were like, this is, and that's another thing between you and I. Sometimes I'm always like,
between you and everybody else.
Between me and everybody else, between you and I. Like, it's just like, sometimes they put you in these roles and they're almost like, let's see if she can do it. Let's see. And it's very much like, but I didn't think too much into that. It was very much like, well, I just got to roll up my sleeves. Now I've taken this job. It wasn't something I was kicking it for me. It wasn't something that I really loved because I'd done such great work here and I just wanted to coast in a way, if that makes sense.
I just coast for a couple of years.
Yeah, I just always like coast for a couple of years. I've been building all this stuff, but no, it's like you have to build again. But it's funny because this building that I did in this 1 year, it's a building I've been doing for all those years. So it's like clockwork.
Yeah.
So it's self-management is now I have it for all of North America. So it's a big role where it's like do it for all, like any financial services technology customer that falls under that umbrella falls under North America. But you know what's actually so ironic? We don't have a global financial services technology team. So technically, I am also
It's you.
doing that globally for all of AWS.
So, in other words, if there's a business like this in another country, because there's no other team to handle it,
Yeah,
you are global. Like your
yeah,
title says America, but you're global.
yeah. I'm
I love
technically global. Yeah,
it.
yeah.
I love
Which is exciting. I know, which is crazy, but it's exciting. So that's my journey. I know.
Yeah,
Kind of
one of the
a lot,
questions I
but
everybody is like, what's a negative experience and what did it teach you? Or give us an example of a time that you've bounced back. But this story encompasses those two big questions.
yeah.
And I think that one of the big learnings that you just said there, another thing is I'm very aware of the discourse on social media because I'm very concerned about the effect that it's having on young women. And one of the things that people say a lot is like, it's kind of a complaint about how don't be so good at your job because then they're going to give you more work and less pay, blah,
Hmm.
blah, blah. But your story just indicates like, you're right. When you're really good, they're going to give you more because they believe in you. And if you play your cards right, you can play that
Yeah,
into a bigger thing for you. And if they don't, then you go to another company. But
that's right.
never, the solution is never to like go down. Like, don't
No,
ever be
no,
worse. Always
no.
be great.
Always be great. And that's the thing. Like, if you know your worth, I always say you would rise. If you
You
know,
would rise, or you'll find
rise.
not the place for you. But the
But
solution is
finding another place is also rising. That's another thing. Like, it's not,
100%.
it's, and we started this whole conversation where you were like, oh, wow, you've been in these companies for 10 years at Cisco, now 9 years in Amazon Web Services. But if you really look on the hood, I've literally had like three different
Right.
jobs, like
Very
three different
much.
companies do this.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And true. Like nowadays, people don't stay that long. And I always say, if you are being recognized for your good work, you're getting different experience, you're learning, you're being paid well, then you don't have to leave.
No, no.
Just leave. Those
That's
things aren't happening.
Yes,
Totally
that's the biggest thing. I think it's really getting the different experiences,
agree.
learning, and putting yourself out there.
Meeting new people, like
And you,
every new customer for you is a new contact.
yes,
Like getting
yes,
in, going to bigger meetings, and you feel like you're growing as an
yeah,
individual. So you don't have to
yeah,
leave a company if you're getting
yeah,
all of those things.
yeah.
Let's switch to like more questions to get to know you, and I want people to
Okay.
see the side of you that I know and adore, but also like somebody with really discerning taste. Like, again, nowadays, like the word luxury, I feel like has almost lost its meaning.
Mm.
And I know that you're somebody that has a taste for the finer things.
Oh
How
my
do
gosh.
you define luxury? Like, what does luxury mean to you
Yeah,
or feel?
yeah. Well, it's funny because you talk about finding things. I mean, there's all the material things around like luxury and, whether it's the
Yeah,
diamonds and the clothes and all that. But, and being a mother and being a career lady, a friend, a sister, all of those things, being a daughter, luxury for me is just the luxury of time, girl.
yeah, I feel you.
Luxury, it's time. Like time really is. It's the highest form of luxury for me. And I'm very, very conscious about how I spend it, right? Because that's the thing. Luxury, it's like it's money. Time is money, literally.
100%. And the thing about luxury is it's supposed to be things that are not replaceable, things that are difficult to get, and time is absolutely
Yeah.
completely irreplaceable, and you can't put a price on it.
You can't put a price on it. To me, it's the biggest luxury for me. That's why I'm so intentional about how I spend time away from, like, when I'm at work. Like, yes, I'm at work, but there's still things, of course, that are important, all of that. But like when I'm with my family, I'm with my family. When we talk about like spending time going on vacations, like experience is just so big. Like I have those experiences. We have what we do during winter break and winter holiday, what we do during spring break, like spending the time, also spending time with family. Like my parents are older. Like those things are really important to me. And what it boils down to is time. But
Totally.
trust me, during that time, of course, I'm wearing the, my nice things, and I have all the things
No,
that,
but I think your
but
answer,
what's
exactly.
that?
I think your answer is perfect and
Yeah.
true,
Yeah.
correct. And I think so many people relate to that.
Yeah.
Um, I wanted to ask you about your opinion or your take on this discourse of like the idea of like, can a woman have it all and women wanting to have it all and that even being a
Oh,
goal.
me.
Like, I don't even like it, to be honest, because I think that's
To be honest, I don't even know what that means. Like it's the
exactly.
same thing like when people are like, what is it? Oh, it's all about with time management. What is it? Oh, work-life balance. Like all for me, I call it work-life prioritization. Like you prioritize what's important to you at whatever time. Like I'll tell you, and it's a no-brainer. I have certain time where I'm like, Wednesday at this time. So my older child goes to school, and on Wednesdays they have something called meeting for worship, and that's when they allow parents to come in and to sit down for 30 minutes, kind of meditate. Like they have the whole school there, so parents are invited, but the kids are also there, and it's a time to talk about what's happening in the world. Or it's a quicker school, or at least it's part of it. It's like, and they talk about being kind to people and what's happening and how are we dealing with things. So it's such an interesting phenomenon. Again, it's not part of why we picked the school, but it's a really amazing add-on, and it's a really good thing to teach earlier on, where you're just kind of like, you sit in yourself and you're centered, and for that moment you're able to just think about, like, not like, oh my goodness, I have this appointment at noon and I'm running, but just center yourself and like, what really matters, what's going on, how can I be kinder, what does this mean when it's Black History Month? Like, how am I, kind of tapping into that, or seeing, or Rosh Hashanah, the Jewish holidays? Like, how am I being respectful and celebrating some of these, or at least just knowing that's happening and
Yeah.
in touch with that? And they know at work, like during that period, I think it's like 9 to 9. First of all, I drop the kids off at school. Speaking of time, that's time that I spend. I do the drop offs. And between 9 to 9:30, I am at meeting for worship. And during that period, it's also, and I love that it's middle of the week. It also just really centers me, you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
just
So it's
on
about
that.
choosing, like there's
Yeah.
not one where every day is a bit different and you sort of
Every
prioritize.
day's a, every day's a bit different. I just prioritize. And look, some balls would drop, but I'm okay with that because I know the balls that I'm dropping, the balls that I'm juggling, and the ones I have in my hand are a lot more important than the ones that are dropping. And I'm
Yeah.
okay with that.
Yeah.
So having it all, I think it's a myth, but it's a myth. But really, like for me, I feel like I have it all, but I don't. But for me, I have it all, if that makes
Uh,
sense.
yeah. Which goes
Yeah.
into my next question. Just like, how do you define success? Like,
Yeah.
what is it to you and for
Yeah.
you?
I think we talked about it. It's being able to balance. I mean, it's not really balanced. Being able to prioritize motherhood when it matters. Being able to prioritize like being a friend, which I keep working at. I keep getting better. But like when my friends are here, right, I make that time and we make memories and I cherish those memories, right? And it's stuff that I hope we'll keep building on. When I'm with my parents, I'm a daughter. I'm very much like
Yeah.
there. Um, I mean, success for me is just it's having all the when I'm around the folks who it's having all the folks who matter to me present when we're
Yeah.
present together. You know what I mean? In
Yeah.
time. And yeah, I think that's really it. Having the freedom of that, the freedom of having those folks around me and the time to kind of spend with them around that. Because it could be
On
gone.
the note about relationships and friendships and all of that, another big subject that I talk about a lot because I'm a big believer in community. You talked a little bit about Eric, but do you want to just tell our readers and our watchers, listeners, how you met?
Yeah, PGR. Oh my goodness. It's a really short one. We met senior year of college. Well, senior year of college, I guess technically for him, for me, is like my master's. And I remember him thinking, why are you even staying at school longer? And he was like, I am out of here at senior year. We met February 2027 or yeah, 8. I was like, what? Well, anyway, senior year. I was like, it's all like funny, but I'm trying to remember the year exactly. I think it was 2027. Yeah, it was 2027. It was his senior year. Um, but I was still going to be at school for another year. That's what it was. Duh. That's why I kept on thinking it's 2027. But anyway, I was still going to be at school for another year. He was leaving. He knew exactly what he was headed to, going to San Diego. I was still like, I'm here trying to figure it out. Um, but we met because a friend, my college best friend at the time, was dating his fraternity brothers. And she's always like, let's go to the parties and all that. To be honest, I mean, being Nigerian and maybe just being who I am, I'm like, no, I got to study. I got to do all that. But it was senior year, literally our senior semester. This is like February. So I'm like, YOLO at that point, like YOLO the last like 4 months, right, of senior year. And I was like, sure, I'll start going to the parties with you. So I went with her. And Eric noticed me, we just said hi, whatever. It was very much like, who's again, talk about standing out. I walked in, it was very much like, who's that person? I didn't really know at the time. But then, of course, we left the party the next day. My college best friend and her boyfriend at the time, they came to our house, like our dorm. It was a house, it wasn't a dorm, but like where we lived in. And they were all chuckling and giggling. I'm like, what's going on? It's like, oh my goodness, like Eric, noticed you and he wants to go out with you, but like, ha ha ha, like, would you even like go out with him? And I'm like, what's going on? Who's this Eric guy? Like, whatever. And she was like, no, but she was like, why don't you just go on one date with him? Formal is coming up. Just go to formal. And it'll be fun because formal is kind of a big thing. It's like when you go to like the black tie events, now in real life, but it's like, just go to formal. It'll be really fun. We would just hang out, it's like free drinks. We're having a good time. And I was like, okay, well, that's okay. Yeah, that's fun. Whatever. Like had the ball gown, all that. And so I was like, give him my number. He texted, we spoke, and I was like, okay, we'll go to formal together, which is also super ballsy, by the way, if I could say that. Like, I'm just going to formal with this guy. Also super ballsy for him to say, I'm bringing this new girl. I could have totally blown up in his face. Anyway, we got on the bus. They took us to formal on this bus, like whatever. We got on the bus and I sat next to him. And we're just talking. We get to formal and I spent zero time with my best friend. I just enjoyed his company and just talking about different things or experiences, traveling. And the rest is history after that. And we're graduating. And I think this is the important piece. Because we're graduating, there wasn't pressure like, oh, we have to be boyfriend, girlfriend, we have to be all this. But we liked each other. We weren't like, oh, we're just in this casual open relationship. We're like, well, let's see what this goes.
Yeah.
And he was done end of May and he was leaving, or June or whatever, graduated, and he was leaving and I was staying. It was like, well, we'll keep in touch. We'll see where it goes. But I would just get letters from him all the time. And I loved how he was very old school in the way he would have handwritten letters and send them to me, which I really loved. Oh my gosh, I love those. And send me cards and things like that. And yeah, we just kind of kept in touch. And here we are.
We talked about this briefly over the summer, but I think what you said was really cool. When you meet young,
yes,
it's easy to, at some point in your 20s, be like, did I meet too young? Should I date other people? Should I try something else? Like, how did you know and not have that anxiety about trying other things and knowing that this was the guy?
Yeah. Well, it's funny. I didn't want to bring this up, but I'll say it. But like Eric was in the military. So he was gone after college. Like they had him in San Diego for a couple of months and then they had deployments. So they were gone for 6 months at a time, 8 months at a time. So who knew what the heck he was doing, And I think that's where it was like, we didn't want to put pressure on ourselves, but as long as we really liked each other and we're feeling each other, is very much like, oh, so cute. He would share his experience. Oh, I'm in Thailand this week and here's what's happening. I thought about you when I saw this, and we were getting to know each other, but there's just no pressure. But we knew that we were dating and, we're in a relationship and all that. But also, remember I mentioned I'd been at Cisco. I was in North Carolina for that 1 year. And then even after that, I was in DC. I was still going out with friends. I was still going to bars and all that, but I was very respectful and nothing. I think at that age, and maybe this is just the benefit of him not being close and being there. At that age, when you don't have someone who's like right there, it's kind of silly where you're just like, I felt like if I did not miss him, I would just call and say, hey, this has been nice. Let's just be friends. I've met somebody else. But there was no one that was really, I wasn't really interested in anyone. And even when you talk to people at the bars or whatever, we're talking. It wasn't like we're talking like we're in a relationship talking, just like, oh, nice to meet you.
You're meeting a lot of people. Yeah.
A lot of people. And I was meeting people like with friends. All my friends were also single. So that's the thing. I was going out with lots of single friends who were meeting people, but we're not meeting exclusively where it's like, oh, now we've had too much to drink. Let's go to that room. It was very respectful, all of that. But no one was interesting. In fact, I would tell them like, oh my goodness, I met James and, Jeremy or whoever, blah, blah. These people go to GW, whatever. Just interesting, but it wasn't, we're very respectful. So that's what it was. There wasn't a pressure in, hey, we're so exclusive. We're in this relationship that you can't go out. It was like, no, enjoy yourself. Like, we're in our 20s and he was doing the same thing too, but we're being very respectful, not exclusively dating anyone or trying to take people on dates.
Okay, well, that makes a lot of sense. It wasn't too intense too soon.
Yes. It wasn't too intense too soon, but I would say I definitely remember him coming back from deployment. I think he went through something. I don't know if it was like he had a bad hip or something, like he hurt himself. And so he had to do one of those scans, one of those CT scans.
Yeah.
Funny story. And I think they put him under it for like 4 hours or something. I remember he was like, and I was just laying there thinking, if I don't make it out, like, God forbid, like, I don't even know why he was thinking like just anything. It was like, what do I want to do in my life? And I was like, and that's when I decided I really wanted to be with you. it was so sweet. And, and then I remember that. And Eric being Eric, he was like, I'm giving you a promise ring. And I was like, what the heck is a promise ring? And that made it kind of a little bit more like, but that was like later on. Down the line, I was like, what does that really mean? But I thought that was really sweet, and it was just intention about like being serious, but just like, but I'm not always here. But I want you to know, like, I want to take it to the next level. I guess that was kind of like us being more.
Yeah, I mean, it's a win it. Like, I'm like,
Yeah.
you're not wasting your time with me. Yeah,
Yes.
I love it.
Yes. Yeah. That
And
was really it.
that.
Really, yeah. That's very much him. Like, very much like, I want you to know how I'm feeling, and are you feeling that way? And if not,
Yeah. And
yeah,
I think that, some of the advice I give to girls today, it's like, if they're not trying to lock you down, they have to say it out loud. It can't just be
yeah,
like, I'm assuming we're together. They have to say, like, I hope that you're not seeing anyone else. Like, I want to be with you. And if they don't say that,
yeah.
you
No,
gotta
I agree. And it's
create.
funny because people always ask me about relationship advice, which I'm like, now there's so many of those dating apps. I'm not the best person. Like, maybe Noni, you have some tips, but I always tell girls, like, I think there's this two spectrums. Like, be patient about new experiences and things that maybe you didn't really have. Like, date someone out of your race. If have an open mind is what I'm trying to say. Have an open mind. People
Yeah,
always have like, oh, he needs to be 6'5". Why? You're 5'2". Like, what's it's like,
100%.
you have to have an open mind about stuff, things like that, and be patient, about that.
I
Be
agree.
impatient about your non-negotiables, like your values,
I agree.
characters, all of that. So I would say be patient about height, career, like all these things that seriously they don't even really matter at the end of the day. And being patient about if a guy is just like, yeah, I guess what kind of dating I got, no, being patient about that and know when to walk out. Um,
Exactly. It's. I mean, I couldn't have said it better. What qualities do you look for in a friend?
oh, is it so sweet? Um, I think it's probably evolved over the years.
Yeah.
I think just loyalty and friendship is number one for me, just in general, without even going into it. And then I would say friends are respectful. Just like
Mhm.
having boundaries is really big. I am in such an interesting place where it's like I have my career, there's that, but I also have my family. And I'm not always going to be there on like a Friday at 7:30 p.m. Maybe I'm a little bit late, but I'm sorry. I'm like telling you all this stuff. Just be respectful of that. Don't be all like super nasty. Don't feel like I'm trying to do it just because I'm trying to be rude.
Yeah.
Also be respectful of my boundaries. If I'm like, I'm sorry, I can't make this party. I really need to be with Eric right now, like whatever it is. Don't be like, oh, look at you, like you're the only one that's married. That's what I mean when I say be respectful in that. Just having boundaries, that's really important to me. And then the last thing, look, I am still really fun. I love a good time, all that. I love friends are adaptable. I want to be able to walk into a boardroom with you, and I know you will show up. We'll be at the table, at the head of the table. We're in our blazer, and we can go toe to toe with guys or whoever on the other end.
Yeah.
I want to be able to walk into an event where we're just being silly and it's just black tie, whatever, or a fashion show and it's like, oh yeah, oh that's Chanel vintage 2025. You know what I mean? Like 2005. I love an adaptable friend, just a
Totally agree.
fun adaptable friend.
Oh,
It's really it. You
such
know,
good
you
act.
know what I mean.
Totally. Um, I
Oh,
was saying, I went to a Pilates class last weekend, and the teacher, it was a new class, new studio. The teacher reminded me of one of my old friends from New York, and I was texting her today. I was like, I I I forgot what it's like to live in the same place as some of my favorite people. You know,
yep. No, I know
like,
what you
I
mean.
miss you. I can't believe I used to see you every day
Every day you take that for granted. I
because
know.
we worked together at the time. Yeah, but like,
Yeah.
because I've moved so much in my life, and
Yeah.
I'm into it, and I love having friends all over the world. But I like miss like
I know. I
that
know.
together sometimes. But I don't know
Yeah,
why I brought that
I
up.
know. I know.
You've touched on so many of the questions I would have had for you, which I appreciate. Last couple is just about motherhood. You touched on it a bit. Like, how would you contrast the reality of it against what you
Yeah.
thought it was? Does it match, or is it totally different? And
It's so funny. I have to be honest with you. I don't think I had this whole picture of like what motherhood is supposed to be or look like. But I mean, I knew what kind of mother, my mom was probably like just the best example and the only example I really knew or appreciated. And my
Yeah.
mom, so let's kind of go into that. My mom, I would say, is probably a good combination of like being a traditional mother, but also being a modern, like when you think of like motherhood. Um, my mom had me, it's so funny what would be considered late or like impossible back then. She had me when she was 40 and she was a banker. So maybe that was also my foray into like kind of going
Wow.
into all that. And she left her job shortly after that. Part of that, I think maybe she'd spend time with us, or she had had a good career that she was
Yeah.
happy with.
Yeah.
And so I had that traditional mom in that sense, which was a stay-at-home mom. But don't get it twisted, like a stay-at-home, still very like, what would you say, like career mom in a way, still doing all
Yeah.
the things, been very much Nigerian. And oh, my kids are all in here. So anyway, so she was a stay-at-home mom. My mom would cook every night. I mean, of course, she still had the resources and the help, but she would cook every night. I definitely remember that. She loved being in the kitchen, things of that sort. But what also made my mom very much a modern mom was she's like, I am still going on my trips and you coming with me. Like I said, I was like a handbag with my mom. So we would go to London, we would go to Paris. She loved Paris. We would go to Paris literally, I feel like every summer. And I remember being very much like, this is kind of annoying, but I also love the idea of it. Like we're going to restaurants, we're shopping, it was still fun, but I would miss some of my friends. But she would also see friends, right? Which is how I also got to make some of these family friends. So for me, my view of motherhood is there's somewhat of a career. Your career could be whatever you think it is. There's also the traditional sense of like you're cooking. I don't cook every night, but like but New York City, you can make do, right? Whether it's ordering in or making certain things. And I love like on weekends or summers, I try to, cook and all that. Um, but the traveling aspect of it and the experiences, that's why I do experiences with my kids, whether it's winter break or spring break and all that. So I guess to answer your question, yes and no. I didn't put any pressure on myself where I wasn't like, oh wow, this is what motherhood should feel like. But just based on my experiences with my mother and how she was, if I could even be half as amazing as my mother, was, I feel like I'm doing great. I just kind of took from those experiences and made it my own,
Yeah.
in the best way.
I think that's a good answer. I
Yeah.
don't know how I would answer it. So, but I think it's beautiful. And I think that there's always something from our parents that we are trying to replicate or change.
Right.
It
Yes.
forms a lot of how we become parents as well.
Mhm.
All right, last round of quick questions.
Yep.
Fun side. What is your favorite dining experience in the world? And you could say your mom's kitchen. You could say, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, my mom's kitchen, of course. Gosh, she makes such amazing Nigerian cuisine that I don't. You know how you taste different, like there's rice with like stew and the stew. My mom's stew, haven't had that. It's
Mhm.
just anyway. There's that, but ooh, I have to think about this one. I mean, I travel so much. I'm always experiencing new cuisine and all of
Okay,
that. Ooh,
favorite
ooh,
one.
ooh. Actually, I have one. I think it's a favorite for me because of the memory.
What is
Um,
it?
and it is at a place called the Inn of Little Washington. It's right
Oh,
out
yes,
yeah, yes.
in
I
DC.
in DC. Yeah. Yeah, it's like outside DC. I can't remember. Yeah, it's like in a town. That's where Eric and I got engaged. And it was just so special because everything was so curated. Like I remember Eric was like, speaking of yoga, I was a Pilates or a yoga class, and we were done, and Eric's like, it was one of our dating anniversaries, and like, pack your stuff, like we're going camping. And I'm like, we both know I don't go camping. He was like, I packed your bag, we're going camping. And I was like, whatever, sure. So he just said, pack something nice also, we'll do dinner. I was like, sure. So I did that. And at first I thought he was just joking, like we're going on a flight, going to Miami or something. No, we're driving. And I'm like, Eric, you're really serious. Like, this is Virginia. We're really going camping. Like, what are you thinking? This is not my idea, like an anniversary. And I remember we pulled in, and it was just this really like cute, little hotel. Um, and I was like, oh my gosh, it's the Inn of Little Washington. I've heard of it. And we went in, and they showed us like our suite, and we're in there. And I think it was like the first night, like of course Eric couldn't hold it in, and kind of proposed right before dinner. And I was like, oh my gosh. And he proposed in like it was like a pair of crystal Louboutins that I opened, and the ring was in there. It's just ridiculous. Of course, at that time, it's all these things that he knew that I loved. And he was like, I thought these shoes would go perfectly with the dress you're going to wear tonight. And then, of course, we walk out of the hotel room. They had the staff there with a glass of champagne, chairs. It was very much like, and then we walked into the restaurant. Everyone there was like, congratulations, congratulations. The menus, it was like, congratulations on your engagement. I think I still have it somewhere. It's like,
Oh,
it was the
wow.
menu. Yeah, and it was like a 9-course like meal and everything. It had wine pairing. Everything about it was just so, I felt like it was just us in there and just dining experience just for me. I'm sure they have that every weekend for whoever's getting engaged, but at that time, it just meant so much. The thought they put into it, the staff all knew we got engaged, so they were all. It was very much like, "Is this to your liking? How would you like this? This pairs really well with that." The sommelier would came around and congratulated us, asked about our story. I just really love the attention to detail. And the food was really delicious. It was amazing. I think Eric actually changed a couple of things in the menu. Like there's certain things I don't like. Yeah. And they were like,
Nice
oh,
details.
things
I
like
love
that. It was great. Yeah.
that. All right. Money's no object. An insane amount of money is just dropped into your lap. And you can only use it for travel. What are you doing? Where are we going? Who's coming? What's happening?
Oh my gosh. I love to take on my girlfriends and my family. I mean, I'd love to seriously take my family just because I just want to spend time with them all the time. And and here's the thing. I want my girlfriends to come, but I want my girlfriends to show up at like different like places. So like certain folks will come to Capri. Certain folks I think will be at Seychelles. Certain folks will be in Saint Bart's, right? Certain like south of France. Like these are all the places. See, I'm not even picking one place. Literally,
So you need a boat. You need a boat.
I need both. I need some girlfriends in Dubai because I know what that means. You know what I mean? Like that's how I would do it. I would seriously just travel everywhere, take my kids with me.
Combined with family and friends.
Yes.
Yeah, that's my answer too. I want a boat, and I would want to.
Yes, I would do a yacht. Yes.
Exactly, and I just different friends on different weeks and different places.
Yes, different places
with kids and everything. Yeah.
Nothing like that.
Yeah. And so, as we end this, just a couple of questions I ask everybody. But what's next for you?
Oh my goodness! Considering I just took on this role the first career-wise, I really love what I'm doing. I'm excited to keep learning. Just being where I am. I would love to seriously, and I'm working on it. Being on boards has always been a thing. I think, in a way, it's sort of a way to give back. I would love to do something in like a digital era where it could be in retail, like retail meets technology type thing. That would be fascinating. It could stay in the same lane as like financial services with technology. I'm actually on a board right now for something like that for a company in Africa. So for me, it's kind of like a way of me parlaying my experience here.
Yeah.
Company in Africa, this fintech company in Africa. So there's that. That's career-wise. I think personally, to be honest, I am just having so much fun as a mother, being able to pick and choose what I want to do, where I want to be at whatever time is really exciting. I love to see more of my friends. That's always nice.
Right.
I think just having more experiences, that's what's next for me, like personally. I would also love to do something internationally, believe it or not.
Yeah.
For a little bit.
And a quote that exemplifies your outlook on life?
Oh my gosh, there's so many. But one thing I'm really big on like sharing quotes and affirmations with my kids and family and all that. And one that just is resonating with me right now, even in this moment, is just like, gratitude is the best attitude. Yeah. Yeah.
Fair enough.
Yeah. Gratitude is the best attitude. It really is. Yeah.
Appreciation and taking things in.
Yeah. Taking things in. I mean, you've done so much. I've done so much. We're so lucky. So blessed.
For sure.
I think having that attitude too, people can see it. Like people gravitate towards that. Yeah. I think life can also come at people really fast and hard. And that gratitude is really big. Yeah.
Very fair. I love it. So that's a great place to end. I could ask you 1,000 more questions.
Oh my gosh, I know.
We all gotta go. But thank you so much for your time. I think this was really helpful, informative, and insightful.
Yeah.
You answered my questions without even we having to ask them. So
thank you.
It was really good to talk to you. Thank you for joining me, and I hope to see you soon.
Yeah, I love it. Good seeing you. Thank
You
you.
too. Bye.
Bye.
You are in Vibrant Company, and I'm so happy you're here.